Hello and welcome back to the Card Pool. I am your host, Stu.
And I'm Kyle, and once again, we are coming to you from quarantine as we continue our series remotely.
Yes, we are. And that is not going to hold us back because we are going to be taking a look at the new Ikoria set, not as in-depth as we normally do. But before we do that, big channel news, we are now podcastable. So if you want to get us on the go, yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's been something we've been working towards for a bit. It's still a little in process, but so bear with us. If you have any finds and mistakes, let us know. But it's going to be in the description below. We're on Anchor, Spotify, and soon to become of iTunes. So if you want us on the go, get us in, get going.
That is awesome, Stu. And for those who have been really tuning into us for a long time, we kind of started out that way. We went to video, but now we're kind of trying to do both to get to you whatever way we can. And like Stu was saying, we are going to talk today in our magic moment about Ikoria, the brand new set that has not yet been released. It's coming out on May 15th, so very, very soon. And it's interesting. There's some pretty interesting stuff to talk about. So why don't we get right into it, Stu?
All right, let's start off. And so the first thing from this set, before we start talking about the cards, we're going to talk about a little bit of the card design. And nothing's better than the themes and mechanics that we see sprinkled throughout. And we'll talk about the one that you have a big stick up somewhere. Mutate. We'll go into that one.
All right. Okay.
We'll look at a card here called a Regal. I can't say it. Leosaur.
Yeah, that's
Regal Leosaur. All right. So the card's got effects, stats, all this other stuff, CMC. But we're just going to mainly look at the Mutate. So Mutate is a keyword. It's going to have some effect of cost. It's going to vary for each thing. But pretty much, if you cast this spell and for its mutate cost, you put it over under target non-human creature you own, and then it mutates to that creature to the top, all the abilities from the ones below. So if you ever were a stacks player, this is the best physical representation of a stack to finally actually have that to be visual, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and so to kind of clarify how this works, although honestly, how does Mutate work? Nobody knows. It's one of the great things about this set. But anyway, let's just consider for a moment that you have on the field a 1/1 creature with no abilities, right? And you have this card in your hand. You pay its Mutate cost. You put this one onto the battlefield either on top of or underneath of the 1/1 with no abilities. If you put it below it, it becomes a 1/1 with the abilities of this creature. If you put it on top of it, it just becomes a 2/2 with any abilities from the creatures under it, which in this case would be none, so it just keeps its own. But that's one of the better examples I can think of how Mutate works. You can either pick, it's going to have all the abilities regardless, but you pick what stats it is, basically.
Yeah, you kind of have a mobile version of creatures here, which is unique because sometimes a creature in your hand isn't useful, it misses its point. But being able to make it so another creature you have is adaptable, almost like evolve, it almost makes you wish that they used the evolve mechanic for this set as opposed to the mutate one, but whatever. But it allows you to kind of groom your creature to however you need to have it on the battlefield. And that's actually really refreshing to see in Magic. I personally like it. Now, that's just as the mechanic itself, not for the commanders or any other analysis with it. But this is an interesting mechanic that I hope they come back to. And if they do, it's only going to make the game get a lot more of that deep flavor, which would be really cool.
Well, one thing I would like to add is, as you can see here with Regal Leosaur, the vast majority of the mutate creatures also have the ability, when this creature mutates, do X. Like pump creatures, destroy creatures, put counters on creatures, whatever. So basically, it is trying to reward you for mutating the same creature multiple times. However, okay, so I have many issues with this. As I do with much of this set, but we'll get to those problems in a few minutes. This one, I have two issues with Mutate primarily. One, it's a parasitic mechanic, and what I mean by that is it's like Energy and Kaladesh, and there's probably a couple other ones I could name, but I'm not coming to the top of my head right now. But it's a mechanic that has absolutely no relevance outside of the one specific set that it was printed in. So that's an issue right there, because if I was to, want to build a Mutate deck, which could be cool, maybe, I don't know. But if I wanted to build that, that means I have basically only the cards to work with that we have present right now. And odds are we're probably a good bet. Either never going to see this again or not going to see it again for a very long time because it's a very complex mechanic. So that's a problem right there to me.
I'll let you finish your statement before I jump down your throat with this stuff. But...
Oh my god. Well, fine. The other thing is the mutate bothers me because it's like auras, but worse than auras. And I already had a huge problem with playing auras in Magic to begin with. The big problem with auras, just like mutate, is that you are basically running the risk of getting 2-for-1 at best if you play this strategy, because like with an aura, you can play a creature, you can play a nice big aura on it to pump it up or give it some cool ability or whatever, and then somebody uses 1 mana to Swords to Plowshares it, and you're out 2 cards for their 1, and that's just assuming you did it once. So you could potentially 3-for-1, 4-for-1, and mutate is the same way. Like for a lot of the rules of mutate are spotty, but one that has been crystal clear from the beginning is if you kill a creature with mutate, all the different layers of the card go to the graveyard. It's not like you kill one layer and then the other layer is still there. So the card disadvantage with this is just enormous.
Yes and no. All right, so first thing about your original point is it being parasitic. Like energy, it works with other types of mechanics. Like proliferate is a good kind of example of something like that. It's counters. With this thing, we have creatures with good effects that have ways to even transform, flip cards, stuff like that. But again, you're just pretty much adapting a creature. And the best version of that would kind of be like bestowing. It's becoming an aura onto something else. It can be used again. But to your point of saying, like, hey, this stuff all goes away, they're creatures. They're not enchantments. They're not some sort of new permanent type. You could still recur creatures from the grave fairly easy in most colors. So being able to do something like, I don't know, a Rise of the Dark Realms to get all of them back onto the field like that quick, that seems like a little bit of card advantage that you can go ahead and get for something like that. But again, it depends on the workaround on the deck. You need to have a certain amount of cards to do certain things. It's going to be interesting to see how it grows, or if it grows.
Oh yeah, and I'm certainly not saying that there's probably not some kind of broken combination with that, like mutating a creature out there. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are many, and I'm sure they will be discovered over the course of time. But maybe a couple of these cards here and there are okay, but like a whole mutate-based deck, I'm just not feeling it. I'm really not. I do not want to get 2-for-1. No, thank you. Like it's that big of a deal.
Well, we will digress and move on to the next one. But before we do that, we'll actually do a poll. Kyle, you will be our lovely model and point up to the little blip. Hopefully it's that spot. But let us know if you actually are thinking that this mechanic isn't as bad as Kyle thinks. So do you agree with me or do you agree with Kyle? We'll just keep it simple like that.
Hey, you got to play this game keeping the worst case scenario in mind, and that's what I do.
Are you viewing this as more of a Stu or more as a Kyle? That'll be our point of saying it.
All right.
Mechanic. This is one that's a little bit more more seen. It's cycling.
Yeah, it's deciduous, you would call it. Yeah,
deciduous. But we'll look at Footfall Crater, and they're usually a whole bunch of things from either creatures to auras to lands to pretty much almost any permanent type except for planeswalkers that have cycling on them. And that would be an interesting idea right there, but that's not what we're talking about. What cycling does is at any point, you can go ahead and pay the cycling cost. You would go ahead and discard this card to draw a card. And they have a whole bunch of different costs for this. It could be 1 blue, 1 generic, 8 mana, 6 mana, anything in between. And so the reason why this mechanic is kind of good, kind of bad, is it makes it so that you can go ahead and wash this card out of your hand for something that could be more useful. So with lands with cycling, if it's late game and you don't want to be drawing a land, well, you can use mana to go ahead and get a different resource potentially. Hopefully not another land.
Well, the one thing I will say in cycling's favor is that it has proven to, in some cases, be a pretty solid mechanic. Like there are plenty of living death, living end decks where basically the whole point is just to cycle all these really cheap, high stat creatures with cheap cycling costs. And then you play like a living end or a living death, bring them all back. That's a cool strategy. I like that. And I certainly don't have an issue with cycling as a whole. The idea of getting rid of a bad card to get a better one possibly is fine by me. However, again, I'm going to rain on the parade by having 2 big issues with cycling. Number one is that it's just boring. Like, this is the ultimate boring, we couldn't think of anything else to put in this set, so we just chose cycling mechanic. It's
You
just
are not
so
correct.
lame. Like, it really is. Ugh.
And
Like,
what's your second
get
point? I'm gonna let you
creative.
get through it.
Get creative, guys. But anyway, my other point with cycling is that historically speaking, there are maybe a very tiny handful of cards that have cycling that I actually want to play in a deck. Otherwise, if I'm just playing them because they cycle, they're all pretty bad. Like, they are. They're just not good.
All right, so you're wrong again, of course. Pretty much, cycling is a form of card draw in all colors. Typically, blue has it, and you being a blue player, I can see why you wouldn't really care for it. It's not the best form of card draw, and it's definitely not. It's more or less, it's a zero draw more or less. You're swapping one card out for another. That's kind of at random, and you're lowering your mana cap for that turn. So it is not something you want to be doing repetitively, depending on your deck, of course. So it's not the best form of card draw like that. But it is good to go see mechanics come back and get some more fun in the sun. Like you were just saying with parasitic like mechanics, well, they're doing it, and now you're angry for it. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
but
no, that's not true. I mean, cycling has never been a parasitic mechanic. It works pretty much anywhere, anytime, with anything. It's just, I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying it's boring. Like, it's just really, really boring. I mean, and like I said, there are some good cards that have cycling on them, incidentally. Like, remember Archfiend and Nifnir from Amonkhet? We both like that card. It's great. And it has cycling, so, like, you know, if you don't need it at the moment, sure, pitch it, get another card, whatever. But the vast majority of the cycling cards are just mediocre at best if you're trying to play them normally.
So we're going to talk about some cards coming up, and some of them have cycling. We're not going to spoil it yet. But we are seeing a revitalization of that, where there are some cards where it's like, well, if you wanted this with cycling, this is the best you got. Well, we're finally starting to get upgrades for it, and you can see it, because like the mana cost for these effects now have been greatly reduced, because Wizards realize, hey, it's not as broken of an effect as we once thought, or there's easier ways. So they've taken cards that cost like 4 mana down to like 2, which is good. Or they've taken it down by 1 and they've given it a stronger effect or something like that. But also, cycling is really powerful for the fact that it's way harder to counter. Since you're not casting the card, you're using an activated ability, it has to be stifled, more or less. And there's only so many counters like that in the game. So it's kind of like an unmolested form of card draw, where you can go ahead and filter out your hand and get a little bit of a better situation for that. And again, not being able to be countered is nice, especially if you're not using any counter spells. The only problem would be like something like a Narset from this War of the Spark, where it's like you can't draw more than so many cards per turn. That would just put a damper on it.
Yeah. So basically, like, I don't know. Cycling, it's not good. It's not bad. It's just kind of meh to me. But anyway, let's move on and talk about, because you stole my thunder with cycling, Stu. I'm going to take this one. I don't care what you say. I'm taking this one, and we're going to talk about, this card is just a very good example, but this next theme we have here is that of wedges. Yes, Ikoria is a wedge-themed set, and right here we have, Ketria Triome, I think, to demonstrate that. Yeah, so this is just one example of one of the new series of 5 tri-lands that we got in this set, that they come into play tapped, they give you one of 3 different colors of mana, and they can cycle too, which, like I said, there are some decent cycling cards, but whatever. The point here is that Ikoria is a wedge-themed set. We see with this land, the main color is blue, and it's paired with its 2 enemy colors, green and red. So wedges are historically in Magic much less utilized than their shard counterparts, which is ally colors. So like Naya, Jund, Esper. This is the last time they actually did a wedge theme set was Khans of Tarkir. So yeah. They really have not explored wedges nearly as much as they have shards. And if you look on like EDH Rec or whatever site you use, the number of commanders in wedge colors is vastly smaller than the number of commanders in the shard ally tri pairs. So honestly, I'm just very, very excited about this aspect of the set because wedges need more love. And honestly, I find them to produce more interesting cards because balancing enemy colors and weird combinations of colors and effects is just much more interesting to me personally.
Yeah, I agree. And also, typically when we see like different kinds of groups of colors, like we see Reanimate, or this thing cares about putting counters on it, like with Simic. But when they go ahead and they add a third color into it, that counter theme kind of goes away into a whole different breed. And it's so refreshing seeing that. And like you said, cons was pretty much the one main time we saw that. And people were like, this is so cool. This is awesome. But they didn't keep supporting it. And it really needs to be something to keep being moved on with. Like, yeah, sure, you need to keep putting stuff in Rakdos and everything else like that. But we have 4-colored commanders now. Some of those cards in those like 4-colored need to be placed out for something a little bit more effective or more modal or better in more situations than just like relying on guild colors to fill up that support. But also, I'm pretty excited for these lands. I have a cycling deck, and it's really awesome that instead of just finishing up the rest of the dual-colored cycle of these lands, where it's like there was the green-white one before, but we didn't have a Simic one of this. So now that we just gone ahead and just jumped further for it and just help support a different like wedge is great. So I'm thrilled about this. It just makes it so that all the other decks out there that are like banned, they're like, where's our card? We're like, you know, you got so much stuff. Don't even worry about it. Like, you've been playing video games all day. It's finally my turn to play. I don't care. It's like one of those kind of things. And
all
it's
right. Well,
really refreshing.
We can agree on that. We can definitely agree on that. But moving right along here, we're going to come to, I mean, if Mutate was confusing, this mechanic Companion is even more confusing. And we have right here an example of Companion in Umori the Collector. So basically the Companion mechanic appears on 10 enemy color paired legendary, not enemy color pair, there's all color pairs, I suppose, so there's 10 of them. But yeah, they're ally and enemy color pairs, but 10 2-color legendary creatures in Ikoria. And the Companion mechanic means that basically, if you want one of these creatures to be your companion, they start outside the game in a special zone. For those of you who play Standard or Modern, it's your side deck. For Commander, it's kind of sort of a new companion zone, really. But anyway, because you can't technically have a sideboard in Commander unless you're playing competitive. But if you want to do that, it basically counts as an additional card in your deck that you don't have to do anything deck-wise to use other than fulfill a specific kind of deck-building rule that each companion has a different one. Ostensibly, the idea is that the companion effects are powerful enough that you can justify building your deck a certain way in order to make use of them. So, for example, Umori the Collector here. Each non-land card in your starting deck shares a card type. So basically, your deck, whether it's Commander deck or a Standard deck, 60 or 100 cards, it would have to they would have to all be creatures, all be enchantments, all be artifacts, whatever one you choose. So, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a card type, and spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. So in this case, just looking at this as an example of all the companions, is the idea that having your everything in your deck cost 1 generic less, is that kind of nice? Yes, but does it really justify that extremely steep price tag of having to run only creatures in your deck, for example? No, just no. And that's my problem. Stu, I'll let you get a word in here, but basically,
that's good.
The companions are just, they're just awful. Every one of them.
Well, I think I have to correct you. It counts as a card outside the game, so if it's outside the deck, it's not towards the 100-card count.
No, it's not.
This could be your 101th card for the companion effect. Kind of cool. But also, if you don't want to use this card as a companion, it can also be one of the 99. We just like for what it is, and you know it's too good not to use and to be restricted with this companion effect. It takes my deck down. It's like if you're forcing it too much, it's not working. Like, it's like, all right, I can't make my entire deck enchantments because I need some creatures or I need a couple forms of spot removal or stuff like that. So it's kind of cool what they did with it. I feel like it could have been so much better than the partner mechanic that we see, where it's like, if this could be any, like, sidekick to any deck and outside of your commander's colors, that'd be really cool because now you can go ahead and make 4 or 5 color decks viable with whatever legendary you really like. And that would have been really sweet.
Yeah. I see where they were trying to go with this mechanic, and I do like the idea of it, but they, in my opinion, most of the companions, they did not push far enough to be interesting. Like, they're just not powerful enough to be worth the deck building restrictions.
There was the Is It one, which was too powerful.
Except for the Is It one that got pre-banned because it was so stupidly and generically powerful for commanders specifically. And I'm like kind of salty about that, but also I don't blame them because it was really stupid.
You were so salty. You sent a paragraph to me explaining like why. Why, God?
But it's well. My main problem is if it was going to be that much of a problem, why did they even make it in the first place? I don't get it.
That's an R&D.
It's just, yeah. I mean, just like the rest of the set, I feel that the design was just not thought through at all. It was just so extremely poor design.
Maybe. But moving on to our final mechanic here. This one's unique in a sense where it's like evergreen effects are now tokens and counters. We're talking about keyword counters, and the card that we'll be looking at for this is Unbreakable Bond. So we'll read up this card real fast to kind of give you the gist of it. So it says return target creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter. So the part that we're focusing on here is the lifelink counter. You now have cards that can, however you go ahead and you meet the requirement to go ahead and get the counter onto the field, make it so like a creature can have an added effect, whether it's flying, vigilance, lifelink. I believe reach is also one of them as well.
Yes.
And it's really kind of interesting to see that because to get this effect beforehand, it was like, all right, you had to remember that this card had an effect. Like if Wonder was in the graveyard, it's like, okay, all my creatures have flying. Or if there's some sort of way, it's like, all right, I'll like take this creature in a graveyard, I'll use this thing, and it comes in and it has like flying, vigilance, or whatever. Like there's usually some sort of like way to add an effect on it. But sometimes you forget it, just like because the board state is crazy and you just don't remember certain things. We now have a way to mark it for the board, and I think that's kind of unique.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I always kind of wondered if Wizards was going to try something like this at some point, so I'm not all that surprised to see it happen. And, you know, it's kind of hard to evaluate because it's such an open-ended mechanic possibly, because obviously there are some really powerful things you can do, like give Death Touch to a Goblin Sharpshooter that just pings off somebody's board, obviously. And that you know, you don't have to use equipments or auras to do that anymore. You could just use a counter. And also, counters play well with, not necessarily proliferate when they're keyword counters, but cards that like borrow counters from other things. This is just another form of counter, something to use as fuel, so that's good. But as of right now, most of the cards in this set, which I was really hoping for some powerful cards like this, but they mostly just seem, sort of mediocre as well. I mean, there's nothing I'm really dying to use that seems so powerful that I want to use it over something else that already exists. You know?
I believe there were some of the cycling cards, which like if you go ahead and you cycle this, put a lifelink counter on a creature or stuff like that. Whereas before, the old rendition was target creature until the end of the turn has lifelink or like the effect like that. So this is definitely an improvement for those kind of cards. Like we said with cycling, it's getting us level up.
Yeah, but once again, as with pretty much everything else, I'm like, is it interesting? Sure. Is it nice? Maybe. Is it good? Jury's out on that one. I don't think so.
It's as good as any of those other kind of one-shot effects where you go ahead and you give something First Strike or Lifelink or Death Touch. It depends on the deck, depends on the style, but being able to make it last indefinitely is better than those until the end of turn effects or until your next turn effects. So I'm not opposed to it. I think it's like a breadcrumb trail. We're going to start seeing how that can actually work for down the line, which would be really cool.
Well, I guess time will tell. So why don't we go on to some hidden gems? Get personal here.
Yeah, so for our hidden gems, make sure as a note, we couldn't choose any of the cards that are in the money card section. They couldn't be the top 10 most expensive cards. We couldn't talk about one of those. So we each chose 3 since this is a newer set out. We're not going to do it as in-depth dive onto this. But I'll start off with my third pick here. And
all right.
Be a card called Channeled Force. Now, this is a 4-drop instant in the Is It Guild. It costs 2 generic and a blue and a red, and it reads, as an additional cost this spell, discard X cards. Target player draws X cards, and then this card, Channeled Force, goes ahead and deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. So this is very Is It in the color pie, because Is It's all about playing sorceries and drawing cards and spot removal. So this is a very solid melting pie of what we got going on for that guild. But the reason this card stands out to me is there are cards out there that make it so you can go ahead and cycle stuff out of your hand or refresh your hand for better stuff. But it's usually all it does. Like wheel effects, it's just, all right, my hand's gone and I have something new. If I have mana enough to go ahead and cast something I just drew, I can go ahead and cast it. But this is now giving you a form of spot removal and card advantage or hand advantage at the same time. And that's incredible, especially for an uncommon.
Well, you're going to hear me once we tune into the next video we do about the new commander set. You're going to hear me complain a lot about wheel decks, and I'll leave those complaints for that video. But one of the things that I have against wheel cards in general is that you may be, discarding your hand to get advantage from the grave and get a fresh new hand, but other people get to do it too, and that potentially gives them an advantage over you, and I don't like that at all. This, however, this is good. This is a good wheel right here because it just affects you. And not only that, but it has the potential to take out a threat on the field. Am I a little bit salty that it doesn't get to hit players? Yeah, it would have been really nice if it could. But still, it's a pretty powerful card to be able to just discard whatever you want from your hand and draw a new amount of the same. So yeah, I won't complain about this. Step in the right direction for sure.
I mean, it would still be pretty decent if it was just creatures, but the fact that they tacked on planeswalkers shows that they're also starting to factor those permanents into the game a little bit more now. And yeah, everything about this card I enjoy. It's in my shopping cart. I'm ready to purchase it when I'm ready. So Kyle, I don't have much more to say if you're ready to go on to your number 3.
Oh, I'm very ready. So going on to my number 3, it's going to be Unpredictable Cyclone. Now, this is a really cool red enchantment that costs 3 generic and 2 red to cast. If the cycling ability of another non-land card would cause you to draw a card, instead exile cards from the top of your deck until you exile a card that shares a card type with the cycled card. You can then cast that card without paying its mana cost and put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. That's a huge wall of text. And just to add a little bit more to it, this card can be cycled too. So, worst case scenario, if this is total garbage, you can throw it out and draw a new card. However, I would make the case that this is exactly the opposite of total garbage. This card is exactly what cycling needed to be actually good. Like, this is... the simplest way I can explain it is that it's a possibility storm for cycling decks. As we all know, possibility storm is awesome. So being able to more or less control the possibility storm and get it for a lower cost than you normally would is amazing. I cannot overstate how amazing this is.
It is a good card. It's honestly, you hate chaos cards, so this is kind of unusual for you.
But it's not, though. It's not. It doesn't affect everyone.
It's pseudo chaos for your deck. Now, you have some realm of control with it based off of like the cards that you're cycling. Now, this would be in a cycling deck or a deck that uses a lot of cycling effects, because if you're only using, we'll say, 8 cycling cards, sure, you'll get the effect off, but how reliable would this card be in there? So you would need a solid footing for that. But that being said, you can cantrip certain combos to make it so that you get a solid advantage with this. Why not go ahead and play a Worldly Tutor for 1? Put a Blightsteel on top. Then go ahead and cycle any creature card in your hand. Blightsteel's out on the field. So this has very easy implications to go ahead and do something like that. Also, this is out on the field, and let's say you're top decking, you get a card that has cycling. All right, well now, like, this card isn't going to help. Let me cycle it, dig through, could potentially get an answer. Again, it's geared on how you build your deck, and it's pretty much cascade for cycling, which is really cool for that regard. And I always like chaos. I like being able to throw in a little variable of luck. I think sometimes you need to take the control out of yourself to make it so that the game could then fall into your favor. So this is a card that I thoroughly enjoy. I'm not sold on it for my cycling deck.
Oh, what? It's crazy.
Although I am flirting with the idea of it, and Kyle, to say the least, has been forcing it upon me in the slightest.
There is nothing but upside with this card. Seriously.
It is pretty decent. It is, but the only problem is, like you say, for these kind of cards, it doesn't net you anything in return. It comes out. Being able to have 5 mana and then another 2, we'll say, to go ahead and cycle a card.
I mean, really 1, like, cycling costs are very low. So you are exactly right. That would want to be one of my normal arguments against it. But in this case, all you have to do is play smart, and you'll get at least one trigger off this. And who knows, with such powerful cards in your deck, that one trigger may be all you need to win the game. That's all I'm saying.
And you're not wrong. And there's ways to cheat out this enchantment. Go ahead with synergies. I mean, Fluctuator, we know, is a card. It's getting reprinted in the Commander set. You can make the cycling cost 0 and fly through your deck. It has its practical applications, to be said the least. And yeah, it's potentially viable. I just like telling Kyle he's wrong because this goes against everything he's ever told me. So I just love I'll tell him at the moment.
All right.
Moving on to my number 2, Kyle, if you don't mind me.
Go ahead.
So my card is called Migration Path. Now, this is a cycling card, so this can work with your previous one, Kyle. This is a sorcery that has 4 mana costs, 3 generic and a green. And it reads, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Afterwards, shuffle your library. And it also has the added caveat of having cycling for 2 generic. This is pretty much the newer rendition of Explosive Vegetation, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts, except the only thing about it is that you can now cycle this for 2 mana. And I really enjoy this for the fact where, with being able to ramp in Magic, it's a big part of the game. But the longer the game goes on, the little bits of mana that you could possibly get don't really matter. It's not going to change the tide of the game. So being able to get this out as a different card is nice. And this has now effectively gone ahead and made it so anyone else who is using Explosive Vegetation is going to take that card out now and substitute it for this one just because it is a better card. And anytime there's a card that can swap out a staple, take note.
Well, I can't say you're wrong about that, Stu. Strictly speaking, this is a better Explosive Vegetation. That's a card that I used to play a lot of. I've kind of taken it out of my decks more and more recently just because, like, 3-drop ramp is where you really want things. The 4-drop ramp just gets kind of awkward sometimes. However, as you said very accurately, Stu, turn 3 Kodama's Reach feels great. Turn 10 Kodama's Reach, not feeling so great. So don't you wish you could just throw it out and possibly get a different card? Well, now you can. So who knows? Maybe this deck will inspire people to start building more ramp into their decks. Who knows? You know, it's pretty decent. I'll go for it.
It's good for landfall decks. They're definitely going to take note of this. And also to take note, green has Kodama's Reach and Cultivate. So now we're following the trend where green's finally starting to get the thing that we see with black, having Merciless Executioner and Flashbag Marauder. We're finally getting more copies of certain things, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. We don't want to necessarily have 4 different copies of Explosive Vegetation out there that are all slightly different because it's, all right, well, now how different are we from Modern now? Like, it just gets a little bit janky on that note. But there's not too much more to say about this card beyond it's just a solid upgrade.
Well, I'll go on for something that is definitely an upgrade. Number 2 on my list of hidden gems is going to be my legendary pick for the set, Winata, Joiner of Forces. This is a sweet, sweet Boros legend, which is a human warrior and a 4/4 for 4. 2 generic, 1 red, 1 white. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your deck. You can put a human creature from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and it gains indestructible until the end of the turn. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, as I said, if I'm going to build with any one legend of this set, this is the one. And why? Well, because this is definitely the standout to me, since it's a really interesting card design, and it gives Boros something that it desperately needs and rarely ever gets: card advantage. This is what red and white badly needs. And the idea of, note on the card, it says whenever any non-human creature you control attacks, not just one per combat, all of them. So you think about the first couple of turns with this. You could play, a 1-drop spell that makes a token. You play a 2-drop spell that makes 2 tokens. You play a 3-drop spell that makes 3 tokens. And then when you play this, you suddenly are swinging with 6 creatures and looking through the top. Math was never my strong suit. Carry the 4, 20, so there's like 30 something cards of your deck and playing whatever you want for free, as long as it's a human. But still, that's insanity.
Kyle, That's from your math. 6 times 6 is 36. So just
Thanks for that, Stu.
Yeah. So you've been all right. So for the viewers out there, Kyle's been talking to me about this card at least every 3 days about it since we've seen it. He's gone ahead and he's brewed a deck. So we'll actually, we'll put the deck link to our tap top. This deck link specifically in the description.
Still work in progress, but I love it so far.
So give us any tips for it that you see. But I enjoy this card. It's definitely refreshing seeing this and the other legendary that they have coming out for Boros. It needs support desperately. The only problem I have with a deck like this is we see it where decks want to be able to go ahead and do two themes, where it's like we see with Yidris the Maelstrom Wanderer. He wants to be able to be unblockable and to go ahead and cast cards to get the cascade effect. So that's two things you want to focus on. This one is focusing on two separate tribes of cards. It's focusing on human and non-human cards. And usually when you see decks like this, it works, but it's not as efficient as it could be because it's trying to pull punches. Because I want to put these cards in here, but I have to put these cards in here. But then I have to put these cards in here. It's like one of the things. It's a catch-22 usually when you're building the deck.
Typically. And you are right about that, Stu. And there are other commanders like Adelice the Cinderwind from Dominaria. And I'm trying to think of another good one, but the famous, infamous Battle Bond Boros partners, where it was like Knights and Dragons deck. I've tried them, I've played them. They're terrible. Don't do it. One of the biggest problems I have is when a deck is trying to like fight itself, and the first time you look at this card, it's like, oh, like it wants me to play humans, but it also wants me to play not humans. Like, what? How is this good again? But remember, you just have to play a bunch of humans that make non-human tokens, not cards, tokens. That's where the key is.
Yeah, Kyle showed me that light, and there's a bunch of cards actually that go ahead and they propel out certain things. Or I know them better in different colors than Boros because I'm more green. Where it's like if it's Awakening Zone, like, all right, that can go ahead and make it so there's Eldrazi Scions. Those cards exist in white and in red to make goblins or elementals or angels and any other type that you can think of. So if you can go ahead and get a good value engine going on or self-propelling value engine and just load the deck with humans, you have a chance. And I wasn't sold on this deck beforehand. I think it's viable. I still have to see Kyle go ahead and lose with it. But once I see that happen, we'll be able to go ahead and fully assess it. But that's the joy of this new set. And as much as he was hating this set, once this card got spoiled, it was Christmas Day for him pretty much. It was refreshing from all the hate mail.
I'm not saying that there aren't some gems in this set. Overall, it's unimpressive. We'll talk about that later.
So moving to my number one, it's going to be a little less inspiring to listen to because we already kind of touched on it for a little bit. My number one card that I'm stoked for, well, it's the Triome lands. There's 5 of them. I have a cycling deck. Being able to get my hands on these, I am stoked. I'm stoked about them for the wedges. It's a lot of the reasons we said before. They have cycling. We didn't mention before that they also have the basic land types on them as well. So they
the most important part.
Yeah, pretty much. And also since they have planes, tons of things in white tutor for planes. And so being able to get that now with any other color associated with it is also a solid piece of value right there. I mean, why not? I'll advocate the link to my own cycling deck in the description down below if you want to check it out. And you can see exactly why I'm that stoked, because being able to color fix that fast is great. And if you're going to be already using a land that has cycling on it and enter play tapped, you might as well get as many colors splashed onto that bad boy so you can go ahead and get a better field set up for later.
Yeah, there's certainly, strictly speaking, an upgrade to the tapped tri-lands that we have now, which are basically the same as these, but without cycling and without basic land types. So this is a huge upgrade to any of those. And yeah, pretty much can either supplement them or replace them almost anywhere, really. I think these are going to definitely go up in price. Eventually, I think they're going to be difficult to get your hands on, so get them now.
I don't know. I think, there's always the initial burst of the bubble, and then it goes up. We'll see. But not to beat a dead horse with this one too much. There's not much more I really want to try to drag on for this one. But your number one, Kyle, splash.
All right. Well, my number one here is going to be Draneth Magistrate. Now, this is one of the most talked about cards in the set, so I'm sure that nobody is really surprised by this. It's a 1/3 human wizard that costs 2, 1 generic and 1 white. And the ability is short but sweet. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So, yeah, that is pretty much exactly what you think it is. I mean, let's just put aside all the dumb things that this stops, like suspend cards. And I mean, I'm sure there are like a lot of other things I could think of, like cheating cards, get cheating cards into play off the top of your deck or tutoring them or whatever. The point is, your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So when this translates to Commander, you play this out on turn 2, and nobody's ever casting their Commander ever again. So how awesome is that?
It's really good. It's honestly a stronger Meddling Mage, because Meddling Mage is usually good for just pointing a finger at someone saying, hey, don't play that commander, which doesn't feel good, especially if politics are really a part of the game. You just go ahead and you put a big red X on yourself for that player to go ahead and hose you. And any other player who's trying to make an ally, they are also going to go ahead and just flat out hose you. This makes it a lot more fair. Again, fair meaning not you, which is kind of nice. It makes it so it changes the game in a good/bad way, because I don't think you should really be able to restrict someone's commander from entering, but there are certain decks where you need to restrict somebody's commander from entering. Like Duretti is one that I totally despise in that regard. But there are decks that doesn't matter. In a Loro deck, this has no power on whatsoever. So you take it for what it is here. It's unique to see this, and you almost wonder why this wasn't in the 2020 set. Why was this in the set? And the only thing I can think of are the companion cards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, this is just such a good card. I'm like, didn't they think about how this was going to interact with Commander? No red flags from anyone, really? But you just slam this down on the table on turn 2, just watch everybody cry because as you protect it for the rest of the game, and nobody can play the game. Like, come on.
There is one way. You can go ahead and do Command Beacon, which if Command Beacon is the only way to get around this, that land's going to go up in value a lot. And especially since it hasn't gotten reprinted since its original OG printing, and a Commander set, yeah, that's going to be a top dollar card soon enough if this ends up being a big problem. But great card, solid piece. It's a human and a wizard. Both are solid tribes, which means we're going to be seeing it in Esper, Mono White, anything else splashed around it, possibly Boros, that deck that you're wanting to make, Kyle. So this is a solid card. 100%
extremely powerful new hate bear. So I'm all about it.
So that's our final cards for the hidden gems. Now we're going to go ahead and move on towards our money card selection. These are just going to be the top 3 cards that we weren't allowed to talk about for this. And as of now, where the price point stands. And Kyle, you articulate better than me, so take this guy.
All right. Well, starting out at $24, the most expensive card in the set right now is Fiend Artisan. Now, this is a nightmare creature. Starts as a 1/1 for 2 mana, either any combination of green or black in the 2 mana. Because it's hybrid. Hybrid's back in Ikoria. Yay.
Yeah.
But Fiend Artisan, it's good. Fiend Artisan gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Sweet. Then X and either green or black to tap, sacrifice another creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your deck. Activate this ability only anytime you cast sorcery. Like, my God, this card is dumb.
Yeah, you're speechless.
Like, I was when I first saw this card. I was like, "Are you kidding me? They just made a better birthing pod? What? Who thought this was okay?"
Better. I don't know about better.
Better. 100% better.
All right. The difference here is we're looking at hybrid mana versus Phyrexian mana. So it's like, would you rather pay life to get the card out faster and use the effect faster, where it was like just using 4 mana in total, taking 4 life and using it the turn it drops, versus this card being like, hey, this may only cost 2 mana, but I will have to wait for a following turn. And again, the X is going to also vary for how you're going to be tutoring for things. And also, who cares how big this creature gets? Because is it really going to be attacking? No. Like, that seems just like BS filler text on a card for me for this one.
No, but come on. Would you rather have an artifact that sits there doing nothing or a giant creature that can block for you if you need to? I know what I'd rather have.
Yeah, but this is sorcery speed, same with Birthing Pod, so it's either you using it on your turn or you're blocking.
Okay, well, and to be fair, if it were just a creature version of Birthing Pod, like a Prime Speaker Vanifar, for example, that pretty much is, I would understand what you were saying. But this is so much more powerful than either of them because of the X. The X is what makes it. It doesn't just get the next step up; it gets anything. That's crazy.
Yes and no. Again, the scalability based on when this thing enters the field. If this is turn 2, you're not going to have a lot of mana to go ahead and get something big. So I like it. It's a little bit fairer of a Birthing Pod for that round because it's scalability.
I don't know about that.
Well, but again, late game it's better, whereas early game Birthing Pod isn't like in that scenario. It's a little bit more volatile for that. But also to note, this card's around $24. We didn't mention that as well. But it's, we'll do a poll real fast. Kyle, point up above your head. Is this better than Birthing Pod? Which one would you rather use in your decks? And this is a great way so we know which one of us should shut up for later. That's the whole reason we do these. But it's a card. I almost would rather it be a enchantment that you go ahead and tap versus an artifact. But who would?
Yeah.
But moving on to our second most expensive card from this set, we are looking at a card in the Simic Guild called Keenan, Bonder Prodigy. Now, this is a legendary creature that you can go ahead and use as your commander for $20. It is a 2-drop that costs only 1 Simic, which is a green and a blue. And it reads that it's a human druid with a 2/2 body, that whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent could produce. Also, for 7 mana, not needing to tap this, go ahead and look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them into the battlefield, with the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. This card is wild. You can do so much with it. It can go ahead and make it so you can get like a lot of mana really quick. Those mana dorks you just went ahead and put out, they're doubling down. And it's not like the amount of mana you would need to play a mana reflection. This is just 2 mana. Your commander's going to die, sure. But if he's about to, and it's your turn, go ahead, float the mana, recast it. Also, the effect to be able to be good in the long game is wild because you can just go ahead and get anything that you've gone ahead and top deck. Like we said before, Worldly Tutor, do that for 1, now pay another 7. Light Steel is discounted.
Yeah, well, this card just, it makes me so happy and yet so angry at the same time. Because once again, I find myself asking this a lot with this set. Who in God's name thought this was okay? Like, really? Who did the power level checks on this? Did Oko teach you people nothing about how good Sith is without even trying to be? Once again, this is a really, really dumb, powerful card. That, like, just with, I'm just going to name one thing off the top of my head. Basalt Monolith goes infinite mana immediately. Turn 3, infinite mana. And with just a little more help, guess what? That infinite mana translates into you playing out your entire deck and winning the game.
So, well, it is colorless mana. It is colorless mana. Unless you're using like some rocks or something, I don't know. It's going to take you a little bit to get the colors online. But you had the potential. You are right.
It's not going to be that hard, dude. Come on. Like, this is... Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say this card... I mean, Simic has no shortage of good commanders. Momir Vig, Krufix, Rashmi, there's a bunch of them. But this one single-handedly invalidates and overpowers every last one of them. This is the Simic commander. There is no argument. It's that good.
Simic's had a great run of commanders, and even like Urtai, the one that was all about the commander counters. Like, you go ahead and get those.
Azuri, you mean? Yeah.
Azuri, yeah. Renegade leader. No, not Renegade. The other one.
The Phyrexian one. Yeah.
That one was just wild when that came out. They've only been stepping up, and it just makes you wonder, what is the Boros R&D doing? And they just like, yeah, you know what? I forgot to do my homework assignment today. Just mark
I
it
know,
0.
right?
And honestly, I really would love to see how this faces against Urza, because Urza is super competitive for just being good with rocks and making things into rocks. This one's just good with your mana dorks, and I would just love to see how those go CEDH. Maybe we'll go ahead and try to find out how that goes.
I absolutely think this is CEDH material. I would
100%.
not at all be surprised to see this dominating sometime soon. But anyway, yeah, let's just move on. Okay, let's hope the next money card isn't just dumb, powerful BS. You know.
All right, well, you got this one, number 3, Cal.
All right, okay. So number 3 on our list for $19 is a Planeswalker, Vivian, Monsters Advocate. Yes, Vivian Reed is back. Cool. She costs 5 mana to play, 3 generic and 2 green, and starts with 3 loyalty. And cool also is that the static abilities of Planeswalkers have come back. So that's interesting. This one allows you to look at the top card of your deck at any time and cast creatures from the top of your deck. Pretty nice ability just to have there. +1, create a 3/3 green beast token and put your choice of a vigilance, reach, or trample counter on it. Customizable tokens. Sweet. And then -2. When you cast the next creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature with lesser converted mana cost, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. What? For a simple -2, getting, I mean, I don't even know. You know, God knows what you could get with this, but let's just say that -2, that -2 is way powerful. Like, holy crap.
Well, so it is kind of neutered in the effect where this costs 5 mana, and this only has 3 loyalty for starting out like that. So if you're going to go ahead and do a big turn, like green can produce big mana, so you could have a lot of mana to go ahead and play this and play something else out. But let's say if you're getting this out on turn 5, it won't really be able to get that -2 effect that you really want it to have. So being able to put out a token is awesome for that. And honestly, that -2 is kind of like a better version of like Wild Pair. Where it's
exactly. That's exactly what it is.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
No, honestly, like, I mean, that effect, like, just that pure tutoring power that green, like, honestly needs more of to be really, really at its optimal speed. If the person that's playing this is in any way competent, you better not let that -2 go off, or you're gonna lose. Period.
Yeah. And it's really cool to see actually how they were paying attention with the card design from War of the Spark, because that was where we first saw static abilities on Planeswalkers. And it's cool that they're sticking around because they are viable. Like, it's not so bad to do that because Planeswalkers can leave the field, and you do see that kind of regularly. If you have a chance to go for it, or if you're willing to lose stuff to get rid of that Planeswalker, people do that play now. Whereas, like, before, they're like, nah, it's just going to be around forever, ever, ever. It's like, no, it can get gone now, and you can go ahead and use spot removal for it, whereas before it was a lot harder to do. So it's decent in card design. It is a ridiculous card, and being a green player, I'm glad I have access to it.
Yeah, well, being sometimes a green player, I'm also kind of glad it exists, but just, yeah, wow, just the power level on these things. But anyway, so I can talk more about that. Let's go on to just some, I don't know, final thoughts about this set. So
the impact.
Yeah, go ahead. Overall, Stu, what do you think of Ikoria?
I think everything Kyle said was wrong. I think Kyle was a little bit right. I think Ikoria is really cool. I am a cycling player. I'll say it again. I am a cycling deck owner, so I'm stoked about having more resources for that deck to use, because now I can be running at a higher form of efficiency, and that is great. I like the mutate mechanic because what we saw on the unset with the mutate, I was like, why would you have to find a specific card to mutate with this? Like, it'd be way better and probably more fun to put it onto any type of creature. And they actually did do that. And I was like, man, I'm psychic. I did this with my mind. But honestly, we all know the answer. That was the truth. So it's kind of cool to see some of that and seeing support, again, for the wedge. I think they did a good job for this. However, I will say I can understand if you're not too stoked about mutate and cycling doesn't mean squat to you. I can see this being a little bit of a letdown. But the fact that Boros got such support that no one saw coming, it's got highs and lows, peaks and valleys. So I say I'd give this set probably a solid B off the surface without seeing how it actually applies to anything.
I'm not. I mean, if you've been paying attention to my comments so far, I'm not a fan of this set. Like, okay. To be fair, are there some really cool and powerful cards in here? Yes, there are a few, but the mechanics are lackluster. The good cards are way too good, and everything else is just trash. So,
Oh my god!
For me, especially as a commander player, this is a big disappointment for me. I got to pass on this set overall. I'm really don't like it.
If you had to give
a letter grade, I mean, I'd give it a C if I was generous. Like
C plus or C minus?
Oh, C minus probably. Like I just don't. I don't care for it. I don't. I think not just because not just because of that stuff, but I just feel like the set, it's just fundamentally poor design. This was clearly not thought through in any meaningful way whatsoever from Wizards, and I don't like it.
If they went to like an old school block set where it's like there were 3 sets of this stuff, I could see it being a little bit more appealing to you in that regard, and a little bit
definitely
more fun to draft. I think honestly, I think this would probably be a pretty hard set to draft to make like a cohesive deck that works well. Because like you could have a handful of mutate cards, and that's good. But if the effect is based off of it actually mutating, then it's bad. And some are color intensive, some aren't. Like where you look at something like Eldraine and you saw like, all right, this actually was pretty solid. It is a little bit hard to compare for that. But again, it is a wedge set where you are trying to see them go ahead and make it so there are some coherent factors of like card effects for them. And that's a hard foundation to create from like nowhere. So I'm not being a hard judge on that. So
yes, but especially like you said, after the awesome sets that were Theros and Eldraine before that, which were amazing sets, so good. This is just a big stinking disappointment for me. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and this is the 1 step back.
As long as you're only saying 1 step, that's all that really matters.
Well, I guess you can't get it right every time, but yeah, overall, bold ideas, not well executed, not a huge fan. Sorry.
Well, I think on that dreary note, we will wrap up this poll time. So that is going to be our little magic moment that we are looking at here at Ikoria or Ikoria. Either way, I still don't know how to say it. But you can go ahead and reach us on a variety of our social media platforms. We have our own subreddit. We have our decks on Tapped Out. If you're interested in what we're talking about for our actual builds, they're in the description below. Facebook, Twitter, you can reach out at us. And we also are on Anchor now and Spotify with our other stuff as well if you want to go ahead and get us on the go.
Indeed. We're all over the place, so follow us wherever you like. And we're also on TCG Player, too. We're affiliated with a link there. So whenever you go on and order things from TCG Player and you cite us as, I'm going to forget how it works, Stu. You cite us like with a code or something?
No, not yet. What it is there's a link, another link down in the description below. We're really forced this.
Down there.
You click on that before you go ahead and you hit close account out on your shopping cart there. It lets them know that, hey, you like what we do. Go ahead and support us a little bit. It helps us make more content, make it so that we can go ahead and improve on certain things, and it's a big help. So if you're planning on buying these Ikoria cards, fill up your cart before you check out, click the link, then check out, and it'll be a big help.
Yeah, take advantage of it, and we thank you for it. So, I guess that about wraps it up. So, yeah.
Until then, I'm Stu.
I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you
next time at the card pool.
You started slow.
No, you waited for it. I'm convinced you're doing that on purpose.
Yeah, but you waited in the beginning.
Oh, come on.